Cloud.
She was one of my students.
Are we allowed to talk?
Yes. Yeah.
So we can start now?
And welcome everybody to a Freethinkers Corner, Books and More. And we're coming live on from Facebook and on Zoom. And I have everybody but our panelists muted and your video is off. And if you'd use the chat feature to ask any questions, I'll relay them to the panelists at the appropriate time. Feel free to do that at any time. And I will relay the messages there. And I'm going to go ahead and shut myself off now. And you four, take it away.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Sharon Daynard. I'm going to be moderating today. We have a wonderful set of panelists today. We have three amazing women who write mysteries with amazing female characters in them. We're going to talk about how they came up with those characters, why they are strong female characters, and I'm going to introduce them to you today. And then I'd like you ladies to talk a little bit about yourself and your book before we move on to the topic. So we have with us Sharon Yang. Hello, Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
We have Arlene, and we have Jeannette de Beauvoir. Oh, I said it wrong. And Jeannette, I did it so nice in practice. So I'm going to have each of you, I'll start with Jeannette, since you're here already on my screen. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your writing, and your latest novel, and then we'll move on from there.
All right, great, thank you. So as you can probably tell from my name, I am half French and I grew up in France. And when I moved to America, I sort of came with this understanding I had gotten of American literature only through my mother, who was American and who read, you know, all of the Golden Age mysteries. She had stacks and stacks of Agatha Christie and oh my God, everybody, Josephine Tay and all that. So I really assumed when I moved to America that everybody committed murders pretty much all the time. And was kind of actually not surprised to find that there actually are quite a few murders that get committed, but I decided to do a few of my own. I have a series that takes place in Montreal, because Montreal is a city that, if I were a city, that would be me, because it's half Anglophone and half Francophone, and that's sort of who I am. So I've got that, which has as its protagonist a woman who is the publicity director for the city of Montreal, which means she kind of gets involved in all sorts of different things. And that's one of the things that I look for in forming a protagonist, is someone who can fit in different places rather than an office worker who would find it more difficult to go out and solve a murder on her lunch break. So, and my current series, and I'm about to launch book 7 on October 1st, takes place in Provincetown, which is where I live. And it has as its protagonist a wedding planner, because again, that gives you some flexibility of moving around and meeting different people. And it also means that I can bring in people from outside the community, so that I don't run into that Jessica Fletcher problem that Murder, She Wrote had, where they killed off everybody in Cabot Cove. So rather than making myself extremely unpopular here and killing off everybody in my community, I do have people come in for weddings and all sorts of different festivities and kill them then. So that's moi.
And what's the title? What series do you have, Jeannette?
So the Montreal series is called the Martin Leduc series, and the current series is just called A Provincetown Mystery. My protagonist is named Sydney Riley.
Thank you. Sharon, why don't you jump in and tell us about you and your series?
Okay, well, I'm Sharon Yang, and I just retired about 2 years ago from teaching college at Worcester State University. So I was an English professor, and so you can guess I love reading. I've always been a reader. Growing up, my parents had lots of mystery books like Jeannette all over the place. And we read and talk about them. We also love to watch old movies together. And I think I inherited this trait from my mother. Like about 2 minutes in, we could usually say, he did it. To drive my dad nuts.
I love it.
So I just always loved the sort of, especially film. I love the sort of fast talking gals and the sort of dark side of the screen and the sort of dreamy world. And, you know, challenging what people expect to be the norm that you saw in those kind of films. So, you know, I thought, well, there aren't enough to watch, so I got to create me some. So I came up with a character named Jessica Minton. In the first book, she's a stage actress, small time in New York, which kind of, as many of us have problems trying to figure out how do we have somebody with time to go get involved in a mystery. So she had more time off without a 9-to-5 job. The first one, I was inspired, set in 1943, New York City. It was great fun for me. You know, doing the research was something I would do anyway. I had a wonderful time writing it. I love to bring in the humor and the you know, quick quips and the twists and, you know, some romance. And so I kept moving along. And the next one, she's more of a radio actress. And instead of being caught up with Nazi fifth columnists, now she is involved in stolen jade, hidden identities, murder, of course, and an FBI agent with an agenda of his own. And so those are the ones that are out. The first one is Bait and Switch. The second is a Letter from a Dead Man. The third one should be coming out in 2021. It's called Always Play the Dark Horse. And I got to do something that I really loved. I love horse racing. So horse racing becomes an important connection to the story. So there is an actual dark horse in the story. And it's more influenced by sort of the film noir you'd see from a person like Jean Renoir, where it's a little bit on the dreamy side and it's a little bit, you know, maybe not nightmarish. So I'm a writer who loves to play with language and be descriptive, but not put you to sleep with it. And I love to give you a strong, sassy, smart woman who doesn't take guff from anybody, but she's still nice.
Arlene, you're up.
Well, I have to tell you that I lived all over the country as a child because my father was an Air Force officer. And so, you know, changing schools and being bused to every Catholic school that and taught by every type of nun who ever existed. I was kind of lonely, you know? So I read and read and read and still do. And mysteries were always my favorite. And, you know, you'd go into the library, the librarians didn't, you know, just a kid, they didn't know what you were reading. I was reading everything, including John O'Hara and D.H. Lawrence and all. Little did they know. But I've loved mysteries. And I've, you know, from the classics on. My own, I just have my 10th book published, and this is a series for Kensington. And, you know, the interesting thing about it was, first of all, I admire what Jeannette and Sharon said, because I don't write heroines who are stupid or, you know, silly or stuff like that, because I don't like women like that. If I know any, I try to avoid them, and I try to be around smart, sassy women like the Sisters in Crime. So this particular series was, I started my first part of that series with Death by Dog Show, because we took our Belgian Shepherd, Lord Byron, around the country to dog shows. And trust me, it's not like Christopher Guest's movies. Dog shows can get, you know, and during a snowstorm one time, I said, you know, this is murder territory, and I wrote Death by Dog Show. The protagonist in it is based on the leathersmith who actually bred Lord Byron. Because I thought, gee, that's kind of a cool job for a woman, you know, she's a leathersmith and she makes all kinds of dog and horse implements, blah, blah, blah. So those are the kind of books I write, always humor in them, sometimes to my detriment. Not everyone appreciates my humor on occasion, but those are the, thank you, Sharon. But those are the kinds of things I like to read. I like quick dialogue. But mainly for me, if a mystery doesn't have a good mystery with clues that the reader can solve, I don't want to read it, and I know they don't want to read it from me.
Yeah.
So that's, by the way, my background, I have to confess that I was a senior executive with the IRS for a number of years, and I lived all over the country. And so there's nothing people can do that would surprise me.
You don't know my social security number, right? I'm just
But
checking this just in case.
I can get it quite easily.
Sharon, how about you? Tell us about your protagonist and your coming
My
to books.
protagonist of my story is Murder Points North. It takes place in the White Mountains of New Hampshire during the holiday season. Her name is Liesl Allen, and she's a geologist who was very unsuccessful in marriage. After her third divorce, she moves home to stay at her mother's inn, and she figures she's going to stay there for maybe 6 months. She takes a short-term teaching position at the local college, and 3 years later, she's still there. So that is my protagonist, Liesl Allen, and I love Liesl, and hopefully my readers do as well. So what I'm going to ask, for the benefit of our audience, I'm going to talk about the defining characters of a modern heroine, and we'll take our discussion from there. So she must be flawed. She's unique, so she captures the reader's attention. She has a sense of self. She's curious. She has a goal that defines the narrative arc of the story. She changes over the course of time. She evolves over the course of the story. In some way, she is wounded. She has a sense of justice. She has skills that make her successful. She does not exist for the support of others. She is there to, for herself and maybe to help others, but she is not there as a second part of somebody else. She's her own woman. And she has the ability to stand up against whoever the antagonist is in our story. And in some respects, she's reckless. She acts with her gut, not really thinking about what's going to happen to her, what the consequences are. So with that in mind, I was going to ask the whole concept, the term modern heroine. What do you think of that? Is she a modern heroine, or would you rather have a strong female character? What do you think of that term, modern heroine, is my first question.
I want to start with that because I am so fascinated by this, from the first time when we started talking about possibly doing this panel, because modern heroine to me just sounds so perfectly mid-century, 20th century. It sounds like, you know, the modern woman, and you'd see those early like cigarette commercials with the woman wearing trousers and having a cigarette and being a modern woman.
Long way, baby.
It's come a long way, baby.
Remember, you've come a long way.
Right. So, you know, when I first heard that, that's all I could think of was this sense of this 50s perfect young woman who gets to do it all. You know, she's got the marriage and the family and the career and the looks and the perfect house and the perfectly behaved pets and all that. And I'm thinking that's so far from the kinds of people that most of us write about, you know, that's not the perfection. So it's interesting how, you know, we've kind of shifted away from the modern, you know, woman, heroine, whatever it is, into something that's a little bit more casual, which also reflects the way, you know, our culture has changed, that you know, no one stares at women now when they wear men's trousers, you know. I would guess that many of us here today who are female are wearing men's trousers or you know, the new female equivalent. Except for you, of course, Sharon.
Well, I'm saying, no, I do wear them, you know. Just
yeah, I mean, we do. And so it was so interesting to kind of go from that kind of concept of, you know, what is a modern heroine in 2020 as opposed to what would be a modern heroine at another time. That I kind of like lost a couple of hours of my life there when we were first talking about this, thinking about what is it about that term that is so evocative in ways that a female sleuth just isn't. You know, if someone had said, let's talk about a female sleuth, I'm not sure I would have had quite the same enthusiasm for it, because that just feels generic, and it's possible that maybe we're starting to think of, you know, like characters as kind of, this is the generic female sleuth, which would be unfortunate, because I can guarantee that amongst the four of us that our characters are totally different from each other.
Well, you know, Jeanette, if I could interrupt there, I had mentioned this to Sharon. I think that modern the term modern is one that doesn't necessarily refer to, you know, a certain age. Because if you go back, who was a more modern heroine than Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice? My God, the woman, yeah, that woman exuded every possible kind of quality that we would want now. I think it has to do more with qualities rather than a time frame or anything else. And I think of Elizabeth Peters' wonderful Amelia Peabody books, right? Amelia Peabody is from the, you know, she's 1900, and yet you couldn't get anyone more modern than that in terms, what are the qualities? And the qualities are that she does have a sense of independence and intelligence. And I don't like her to be anti-male, because some of them are. I think you should have a variety of people in your books, male, female, whatever. So that was my thought on it, that modern is something that, you know, our characters have, but I think it's something that goes back in literature as well. Becky Sharp was pretty modern too, although not very nice.
Well, I'd like to jump in on that too, because my inspiration are actually women who technically aren't modern. They're from like 70 years ago in the 1940s. But in real life and on the screen, you had women showing not just, oh, I want to get married and have babies and I'll just depend on the man. You know, you had very modern in being independent, outspoken. We talked about standing up for what was right. You know, in the real world, my friend Judy John Chapman, her mother at 17 signed up as a nurse to go and into the front in World War II. She was a combat nurse in World War II. I mean, that's not a delicate little flower who faints or what have you, or who has no ambition or can't stand up for herself. I think of my own mother, who was very witty, very smart. You know, she didn't have a lot of money, so she couldn't go to school and get an education. But she really was a strong person, an independent person. And then if you watch, you know, a lot of the films, yes, there are a few where the woman faints at the sign of trouble. I always sort of roll my eyes at a film.
She swoons.
Swoons, yeah. But then again, there are other women like Joan Bennett in The Man I Married, who's being held by Nazis and she kicks them in the way. Or, you know, Rosalind Russell, who, one of my favorite scenes in a movie is where she's a judge and for some reason she has a gavel with her. They're in a room and this guy is trying to win her back and he says, I appeal to your emotions. And she says, motion denied, hits him on the head with the gavel. It's a beautiful, hilarious scene. So, you know, these are women that inspired my writing. And I would want to emulate. Well, I don't really want to hit people in the head. I want to hit people in the head with a gavel sometimes, but I won't. I wouldn't mind kicking Nazis. But you want to emulate them. You want to have their sort of wit, their independence, their commitment to doing the right thing. You know, they're picking themselves up if they've made mistakes and going on. So again, I think modern is, as Arlene and Jeannette were talking about, it's their qualities that transcend time.
Oh, and can I just mention too, since Diana Rigg passed away last week, is there anyone who epitomized the heroine of any time more than Mrs. Emma Peel?
Oh yeah.
Man, she inspired a whole generation of young women to say, wow, you can be brainy and still beautiful and kick the
literally
exterior of almost anyone.
Yeah, literally as well as figuratively.
I was going to ask you ladies what you think. Basically, we're talking about a woman now of conviction.
Yeah.
Correct? So what about Hester Prynne? How does she fall into the role of a heroine from the Scarlet Letter?
Right.
That's a good question. I think that she does in the sense of this independence and, you know, I'm going to live my life regardless of who else is in it and who else is influenced in it. And it's really interesting because one of the things that I think we've all been thinking about this past 8 months or whatever is that this uncertainty about our future and what's going to happen in the world is making all of us, I think, at least I can speak for myself, trying much harder to control the few things I can control because so much is out of control. And I kind of see Hester like that there's so many things around her that are just out of her control and a very repressive environment to be in. And yet she's saying, you know, she is asserting control over the things that she can assert control over.
And I think she could very easily slip into a role in the year 2020.
Absolutely.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, I think we can probably name a whole bunch of people. Jane Eyre, even. You know, the problem is we tend to associate these past works of fiction with their times, and obviously, to some extent, the characters are going to be products of their times. But if you can look beyond that and look into the story and see what the character is doing with her life, I think that many of us would be surprised at how modern many of the women from past literature really are.
And it doesn't have to be a woman. Okay, no. I'm saying age-wise, because we have Scout Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird, who I think fits these characteristics to a T. I mean, at her young age, she is, you know, I think she has conviction, she has morals, and she's willing to stand up for what she believes is right, regardless of what those around her think of her and what's going on. So I don't think age has to do with anything. You can be 5 years old, you can be 105 years old to fit this. And
even Miss Marple, right? I mean, yes. Think about it. She's a product of her time, and yet she's rather a nosy person, and she does end up unmasking killers.
Yeah. All right, so when we talked about who different protagonists, female leads that we enjoyed, that we think are, you know, noteworthy, tell me about your lead female character that we talked about and how they fit into the mold of a either strong female lead or the modern heroine.
So I'll jump in. I have two series. The series that takes place in Montreal. Martine is someone who is married. She's married someone who has children. So I gave her this whole other kind of subplot that goes along with her adventures, where she's learning how to be a stepmother, which is a really hard thing to do. I did it. And have the scars to prove it now. But I thought it was important to give her this other thing that sort of maybe isn't a subplot as much as just this through line through the books, where she's learning and changing and becoming, which I think is one of the things that you know that we talked about, that it's a person who changes and who's flawed and who's curious. So I kind of set her up that way. The other series, the Provincetown series that I'm in the middle of, and then, as I said, I'm about to launch the 7th book in it, which I coincidentally have here. Coincidence, purely. So in the Provincetown series, what I did for Sydney, my protagonist, who's the wedding planner, is I just sort of let her be in a community that is a fascinating and moving and changing place. So that instead of her having quite as many internal issues going on in her life as Martine does, she's constantly facing this changing environment. And Provincetown, if we don't know it, it's a very seasonal tourist town, but it also is something of a gay haven, also an old Portuguese fishing village, also the longest continuously operating art colony in the United States. So with all that kind of thrown in together, what I did really for her as a gift was give her this environment, because there's never something not going on. And so her responses, although she's got some internal ones, of course, she's got a boyfriend, she's got a friend who just had a baby. She doesn't know how she feels about that. I've got her, you know, I've given her enough personal things that you can be involved with her to that extent. But mostly for her, I just keep throwing Provincetown at her, and I can do that until the cows come home.
You know, one thing I wanted to mention also is that age, we rarely see older slew characters who, you know, are spunky and have all these other kinds of attributes too. In my latest book for Kensington, which is Murder at the Falls, the real protagonist is 85 years old. And she defies every stereotype you've ever heard. She's really an irascible old lady, and but smart. And she believes that Oscar Wilde is her grandfather, and she's determined to prove that. And she doesn't care which bodies fall or which people may suffer. And I really liked her because, you know, I mean, you're so used to seeing these, you know, genteel people and blah, blah, blah. She's not at all. And in the series I wrote, the Swan series, I had the mother-in-law she defied every stereotype of a mother-in-law that ever existed. She was a beautiful ex-model who loved her daughter-in-law. Go figure. So I think those are things we can always confront in our protagonists.
Well, you know, I would say, just to tack on part of what Arlene said, and then talk about my own stuff. I like the fact that her the mother-in-law of the main character, loved her. That was like such a relief to read that, because sometimes you get so tired of the same issues and conflicts, and it's nice to see somebody write something that works, you know, that there is something good here. And, you know, for my heroine, I think when I first did a version of the very first version of the first book I wrote back in the 1980s, so I was kind of a young chick then. And,
You're still a chick.
Well, thank you. Some of the issues that I could feel pushing in on me, like, why aren't you married? Why don't you have a family? Were things that I kind of brought into my main character. She was an actress. She loved her work. She had a boyfriend that she loved him, but I don't think that he wasn't really the one. But he was pushing to get married, and he kept always wanting to take care of her. And she didn't want to be taken care of. She wanted to, you know, take care of herself, and, you know, maybe we could work together. And so those are some of the issues I wrote just when I started with her, that she knows she can do stuff. Not everybody else realizes it, and she really feels she has to prove herself. And one of the reasons there's another character that she gets along with so well, things work out between them, is he sees her more for what she can do than more for what she can't. And that really kind of moves things along. It also sort of sets her up for getting caught in the spy plot, but it works out eventually. So,
Sharon, I just wanted to mention, I love the relationship between the two sisters in your books.
oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I thought that, I kept that up. I'm writing the 4th novel now, and I brought Liz. Liz was strongly in the first 2, not so much the 3rd, but she's very strong in the 2nd. And I like that balance. I think it's important to have girlfriends. And that's really what I worked on, especially in the 2nd book. Part of, you know, how Jessica deals with the situations and helps solve the crimes is she talks with her sister. She gets support from her. She gets support from her 2 friends, Lois and Iris. So, and also she cleans up her sister's messes sometimes too. And her sister talks her into doing things like B&E that she really probably shouldn't, but it all works out thanks to a very loyal Scotty dog. But that's neither here nor there. But that's something I think that actually I think is important in a lot of novels that we do see now, which I enjoy, is the relationship, stressing the relationship between sisters or girlfriends, you know, friends, that we are supportive. I'm kind of going all Virginia Woolf on you here, but we're supportive. We're not just rivals for some guy.
Mm-hmm. Well, building on what Sharon is saying here, how do each of you put together your main character? How do you put her together? You start with her bare bones. How do you add all these qualities onto her? Do you have someone in mind when you write this? Is it a friend? Is it you, a better version of someone you admire? How do you do this?
Yes.
Sometimes my first book that was published with the Abacus Prize, I kind of based it on me, but then I stopped telling people that because I heard people say, she's obnoxious. We really don't like her at all. So I didn't base any more on me. But what I do base some qualities on people I've known.
Yeah.
some attributes that are good and maybe or quirky. And if you have a pal for your protagonist, you can give that person a lot of the characteristics that maybe your protagonist cannot have.
Yeah. Well, for me, being an old movie buff, one of the things I did was kind of like cast my novel like a film. So, and therefore, you know, like my main character, one of my favorite actresses is Joan Bennett, as you probably can guess from some of my comments. You know, she's smart, she's sassy, but she also can give a warmth as well. So I liked that, I admired that, and so that helped me. And her sister, much of her I based on Rosalind Russell. So imagine for old movie buffs, if you had the two of them in a film, it would be hilarious. So that really helped me, you know, when I describe how they talk, how they look, how they move. But also, say for those two, I based the relationship on myself and my sister-in-law. And she hasn't killed me yet, so I guess she either that or she hasn't read the book. I don't know.
What I find very funny is it doesn't happen anymore because I talk a lot about who my characters are and where they come from. But what used to happen, when my first book came out, I had people coming up to me who I know saying, "You took that character from me, didn't you?" And I'm thinking, no, absolutely not. People apparently like to see themselves in your characters. So I've always been careful about that. I mean, I think that we're all of us who write, or maybe all of us who create, are pretty good observers. And I think that constantly we're getting input about how people are, you know, how people speak, what annoying traits they have, what endearing traits they have. And because of, you know, this constant banking, I think, of impressions about how people are in the world, we've got this sort of resource to pull from when we're putting someone together. I've never actually done things like taken something from one person, taking it from another. I just have this ongoing thing, and once in a while I'll listen to someone and think, oh, you sound like one of my characters, and I realize that maybe, no, my character really sounds like them because I knew them first. But I think that the important thing, the really important thing in creating a character is starting out with someone that you know can grow, especially if you're going to do a series as mystery writers tend to do. So you're stuck with this person for a really long time. You better, you know, get to know them and get to know that they're going to be able to have a journey and take people on a journey, because that's the only reason, to my mind, that you'd read a series, is that, you know, obviously you like the plotting, you like the background, you like these things, but essentially a lot of us read these series to sort of live out these adventures with this person. And so I think it's really important at the beginning to think through, where can she go from here? And sometimes you're not going to know that because it only comes to you as you're writing the next book and the next book and the next book. But to create someone who's got potential, you know, who's not fully formed, who's going to make mistakes, who's going to look back and say, wow, I could have handled that one better, couldn't I? Because that's what we all do. But then to also, you know, to your point, Arlene, about someone not liking them, you've got to give them that balance. And most of the balance has to fall on the side of likable. If you really dislike a character, you're not going to read more, or you're not going to view more.
That's interesting, though, because how many times do we say that a woman has to be likable? And right. I don't think that she doesn't necessarily has to. Now, you know, there are some people, and I'll go back to Scarlett O'Hara. Many of her activities were certainly not likable, like taking her sister's husband or husband-to-be and all that. But that doesn't mean that someone couldn't be admirable. So I think that you can't hate somebody. For example, I read Gone Girl, and I didn't like either one of those people. I wanted them both to die. All right, neither one did. But, you know, maybe they don't have to be totally likable. But
no, and that's what I say. You really need to balance it. You need to, especially in your protagonist, you need to balance enough traits that are going to appeal to a wide range of readers, but also that are going to enable that person to grow, so that maybe she'll grow out of some of the things that you don't like and grow into something different. But I think that having that dynamic in mind is really important.
Yeah.
How do you, Sharon Daynard, I have to say, how did you come up with your Liesl?
I started with what I didn't want her to be and took it from there. I didn't want her to be a weak character. I didn't want her to be in need of a man in her life. Like I said, she's been divorced 3 times. The last thing she wants is another man in her life. She's a few pounds over, she'll say a few pounds overweight, and she doesn't let that bother her down. But people at the inn she lives in love to tease her about her and call her names, even though these are adults. But I said, I had a list of things I did not want Liesl to be. So once I knew what she wasn't going to be, it was easier for me to pick what she was going to be. And that's how I approached Liesl. And that worked for me.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, I don't think that you can have a protagonist that you live with all this time without giving her some of yourself. But I think that just saying, okay, this person's based on me. I mean, I'm not sure I could go out and solve a crime. I think both of my protagonists are smarter than I am. They see connections that I wouldn't see. So if I based, a mystery heroine on myself, well, not much would get solved. Let's just put it that way.
For me,
I'll just call the cops.
Yeah, exactly. 911, I'm good at that.
This thing about somebody growing, I'm not sure they have to grow. I mean, for example, Robert Parker Spencer, he never changed through how many books? 30 books or something? And I loved every book.
He was a male, that's why.
Well,
so
but Susan, his girlfriend, she didn't really change that much either. And I like some stability in them too. I don't think this, that in romance, if you write romance literature, they always have to have a journey and grow and all that, kind of stuff. I'm not sure it's necessary as much, because look at Nero Wolfe. He sat on his posterior for 44 books and rarely ever changed at all. And I don't think it was because he was male. I guess you could have had a woman the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just depends on what you want to read. I mean, if you may be in the mood for the person who doesn't change, and that's good. But there may be other times when you really would like to see the character grow.
Right.
And a lot of it is maybe they start out in an okay place, and and you can enjoy that. I think you can enjoy all of those. Just depends on what you're in the mood. For me, anyway, what you're in the mood to read at the time.
So, ladies, I'd like to ask, how important is your lead character's name? I know for me, I have my people's names XYZ for the longest time in my stories, and I think eventually they tell me what their name is. For Liesl, I was almost, 3/4 of the way through writing this, and I still didn't have a name for her. And I was watching a morning show, and the woman who played Liesl Von Trapp in The Sound of Music was one of the people talking. And as soon as I heard the name Liesl, I knew that was what her name was. So for you, how did this come about?
Well, I have some names that I like, but also I look at the character, again, where I'm sort of casting it. Like I looked at Joan Bennett and I thought, she looks like a Jessica. And I like that name. And I thought of her sister. And again, I'm thinking of Rosalind Russell. And at first I was going to call her Margaret, because they're kind of sort of traditional New England names. Not that the sisters are all that traditional. Then I thought, they call her Maggie or Peggy for short, and I don't want to go there. And then I thought, Elizabeth, Liz, she could be a real Liz. And then someone I said, I don't know why I got stuck between Margaret and Elizabeth. And somebody said, well, those were the 2 royal sisters, so maybe you had it in the back of your head. But sometimes it's a name I like. Or I would say, if I look at the character and I'd say, what seems to fit him or her? What do they look like? Does, one of the male leads I thought was a James, and not a Jim and never a Jimmy, but always just James. So, and then sometimes I may take it based on, if I thought of who might play them. There was Larry. I thought of who's a good looking guy that really could be competition for her. And I thought, young Laurence Olivier, because he was really hot in his.
Oh, no kidding.
So yeah, so Larry, that would be perfect. So for me, a lot of times it's names I'm interested in or I like, or ones that seem to just fit the character.
I agree. You know, like the
Yeah.
guy who's the protagonist in this last series, his name is Wing Pruitt. God, I
Yeah.
love that name because he's sexy. He's considered the sexiest man in Washington, which they said is not a big, not a big compliment. But I like unusual names.
Yeah.
And in Death by Dog Show, one of the main characters was named Roar Jansen, R-O-A-R, and I got that name because on our Belgian Tervuren website, Swedish guys there, Roar is a common name apparently. And I love it. I said, oh, that's a great name.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes it just occurs to you and you say, wow, that's it. I found the name that's part of that person.
Where did Perry's name come from, Arlene?
Persephone, it's
Right.
Persephone Morgan. Her name came from the fact that I do like a lot of Greek things and goddesses and stuff like that. But she's more a Perry than a Persephone because of her practical nature.
Just tell her to stay away from pomegranates.
Yeah, she's not in favor of those at all. You know.
So in the current series, I'm having total fun with names because I don't know if you know, in computer programming, programmers sometimes leave something they call an Easter egg in the program for someone to later discover. And sometimes it's a trick, but sometimes it's just something sweet and cute. And so what I've been doing through this series is I've been pulling names from either history or other literature and putting them in.
Yeah.
So, and seeing which readers come up with them. So for example, in the most recent book, I have a character's name is Howard Carter. And Howard Carter was the person who explored the pyramids, a British archaeologist.
Yes.
Not sure I'm saying I approve of that, but he's a famous person. I put him in. My protagonist's name is Sydney Riley, and she is female. But the ultimate spy of all spies that James Bond was based on was Sydney Riley.
Oh, I didn't know the first name.
And her boyfriend is Ali Hakim. He's Lebanese, but of course, if you saw early, is it Carousel that it's in? Not Carousel. There's a musical in which, Oklahoma, I get it.
Yeah.
In Oklahoma, there's an itinerant, I believe Lebanese fellow called Ali Hakim. So I don't do that with all of the people, but I do have kind of fun with that because I do spend a lot of time looking at history and looking at literature and finding names that are just very cool. And gee, wouldn't it be nice to bring this name back into circulation? So yeah, it's just a game. But from time to time, a reader will email me with something like, you know, the Ali Hakim came up really fast. I was really surprised at that. But then again, here in town, we have a lot of guys who watch old musicals. So.
I was going to ask a question. Arlene mentioned earlier that when she originally was basing a character on herself, but you know, changed it a little. People said, I don't like that character. So Arlene stopped doing that. Arlene, was it because she was sharp-tongued or she was sassy, she was snarky?
All of the above. All of the
All of the above?
Yeah.
So how do you balance that in a novel? We want our characters to be witty. We want them to have, speak their mind, but how do we not bring them to the level of snark where they turn off our readers?
Yeah, I think that is always a quandary where you have to be true to the character, but yet, you know, you can't have them so obnoxious that no one likes them. But I don't know. I found, for example, that in the Swan series, which I loved, set in Boston, but I liked her a lot because the thirst for justice. I think in all the books that I write, the quest to find justice makes even somebody who's a little bit out there likable, because I think we can all identify for, and that's something in a mystery that if you don't have justice served by whatever means, then I think you cheat the reader. And so if you have someone who's fearless about pursuing that, then that's something good too, I think.
Jeannette, why don't you talk about your two characters that might be considered a tad snarky?
More than a tad sometimes, yeah. Actually, I do find that a very difficult fine line to cross and to tread. And in fact, have another series that my agent has been unable to find a home for because the main character is a little bit too far on the other side of that line. And I was really having a hard time seeing exactly what level of snark is acceptable and what level turns people off. You know, there are certain authors who as soon as you say their name, you've got this sense of the level of I guess snark is an okay word for it, but you know, that flippancy, that level of you know, I'm kind of too cool for this situation. I find that, honestly, and you can jump on me if you'd like, but I find that in Janet Ivanovich. Where
I got sick of them after a while.
yeah, her character, you know, she had some really, really good character hooks, and she continues to write. She's got some very good solid people in there and some really interesting kinds of ways of marketing it. But
I sure liked Ranger, though.
everybody did.
The whole women like Ranger.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's her genius. Her genius is in that marketing, where she actually had this contest where readers would choose one of two boyfriends for the protagonist. So that's just absolute genius. But on the other hand, I felt like her protagonist sometimes, maybe it's Arlene speaking to not wanting justice enough, but she sort of acted like this is all just a hobby and I'm just this cute person doing this cute hobby. And so I do see that there's a line there that obviously her readers don't mind, but that she went beyond for me as a reader. So I'm constantly trying to find that, because I'm always sarcastic in my head. That's my go-to posture. And I'm always careful because of it, because I know how many people whose feelings I've hurt inadvertently because of being sarcastic and being taken seriously. So, you know, you have to sort of say, humor ahead. If you have to say that, then you're not doing it right, you know.
Yeah.
Or else
So
tell
that's
them
why
to get a life.
And I'm very careful, you know, having had this other experience with this other protagonist who went too far with both Sydney and Maltine, to try to keep it so that, you know, my sort of ongoing sarcastic responses to things aren't always their go-to thing. That may be my go-to position, but it can't be theirs, because first of all, they'll start sounding alike, and I don't want that to happen. But I also want readers to, you know, to say, yeah, they're sassy, if that's a word that people use. You know, they're cute, they're interesting, they've got a slightly, you know, skewed view of reality, but not to say, gosh, she's kind of mean, which I think that's where that can go.
You know, that's interesting, because my editor, when I was doing the dog show series, my editor at Kensington, he's a really great guy, but he told me halfway through, you're getting into mean girl territory.
Oh,
I
yeah.
was
And
going
he
to
was
ask
right.
that, because you can get away with that so much in a young adult novel,
Yeah.
whereas, you know, maybe a reader that more our age would
Right.
not.
That's right.
That was kind of my question. Who drew that line, Jet, that you were mentioning? Is it the publishers? Is it the readers? Is it society as a whole? Where did the line start? Has the line been progressively getting more progressive? Where maybe a male character in a book can get away with being that snarky sort of macho type thing, but a female character can't, because of either societal mentality or again, what the publishers are looking for or don't like to see or like to see.
Well, I would say if a male character pulls that kind of crap in one of my books, one of the women is going to kick him down, or another man is going to knock him down to size.
Is that because of the time frame that your book takes place in?
Do you mean that the woman would speak back to him?
In the 1940s.
Yeah. Well, if you met my mom, you would find out that she didn't take guff from anybody. And there were guys who would try to, you know, pull a fast one on her or put something over on her. Like I remember she was visiting a friend, and her friend's husband had some other friends home from the Navy, and they were getting a little fresh, and they said, "Hey, we're on Liberty." And she said, "Well, your Liberty ends right here." And it did. Or I remember, you know, she would be, one of her jobs was an inspector on asbestos materials and during the war. And you had to stick a needle in it and the gauge had to hit a certain level or it wasn't safe. And she kept failing them. And her manager kept trying to get her not to do it. And she said, yes, Mr. Brown, with all your charm and wit, it still doesn't pass. So back off. I don't know if she said back off, but she did the charm thing. So that was in the 40s. I mean, I still do it. I've still been doing it now. So I guess it's in my family DNA. I mean, this is something my dad loved about my mom, that she wouldn't take guff from anybody. He always used to say, your mother is never wrong. And even when she's wrong, she's right. So, you know, that's been in my family. That's been in my books. But my publisher has never pushed me one way or the other. So
I would
Yeah.
just like to speak briefly
Yeah.
to what Chris asked about males versus females
Yeah,
in that.
yeah.
Because I think that, Chris, you're right in saying, you know, there has
Yeah.
been progressive change. I see it mostly not so much in the books that we're writing that tend to have female protagonists, but I'm seeing it a lot in the changing tone that men, male characters, are getting in novels. That, you know, so for example, I think one of the great writers who I find really difficult to read now is Helen McInnes. She wrote very exciting spy novels. But she's also one of the most misogynist writers you can imagine. Even though she's a woman, she's got these people doing all these, you know, exciting, daring do kinds of things, but she still talks about men and girls. And she talks about when one of the girls does something assertive, the men all around her find it very cute. Now, this is obviously reflecting something that was okay at the time that she was writing, because she became a best-selling author. And truly, she writes well. If you can get past that, you know, that men are here and women are here and, you know, never the twain shall meet sort of thing. So I think that it's interesting. And then you see it like a little bit later on the time spectrum with an author like Clive Cussler, who writes male adventure submarine novels, in which he also denigrates women, I think, fairly blatantly. But that's dropped off. If you look at his opus, so to speak, over time, you'll see that he's, you know, he's getting more progressive with his characters. Now, maybe it's harder for a man to do that because, you know, in a sense, if we're talking about some kind of equality for anyone, there's always going to be someone who's had sort of the good stuff and doesn't want to give that up. You know, in some ways it's really difficult, I think, for men to become more progressive with their characters, because we as women have been living that, you know, we've lived, most of us, through a culture that did kind of denigrate many of our achievements. So I think that we're kind of in tune to that, and are going to be much more likely to write female protagonists who are strong and who are themselves and, you know, who do the things that they do. I think that maybe, you know, male writers might be more stymied with that.
But you know what? I got to tell you though, for me, when I'm writing the male characters, especially if they're, you know, principal characters, I like guys. I don't want any wusses there. I mean, I like a guy who can, you know, who has strong attributes. And needless to say, I make them kind of hot, but still strong attributes, who can appreciate a woman who is also strong.
Yes.
Right? I mean, you know, I think that you can, I think that's a balance that you have to have, but I don't want a guy who is so enlightened that, you know, he's not, he doesn't have a lot of the strengths that men can have as individuals. So I like to see that too. And it doesn't bother me when I'm reading books, depending on where they are, if there's a quote progressive attitude or not. If there's if it's a mystery, I want a good mystery and the clues and all that kind of stuff. So as a reader, it doesn't bother me.
All right, along with, this all got started with snark. So there is a fine line between snark and humorous, correct? How do you not step over each of your characters do have humor. Each of your books have humor in them. But how do you, for yourself as the writer, know where that line ends, where your humor is now edging into snark? Or don't you know? You just hope that it's not.
We pray a lot.
Well, for me though, I think about, is this something that would hurt people? Is this something that's really disrespectful?
Yeah, mean.
You know, so I guess I think we all put a lot of ourselves into the characters and you know, think about how would I feel saying this, or what kind of reaction would the other characters have? So for me, if I don't want someone to be snarky, that's something I, you know, breed into. What is the reaction? Is this really something that would be hurtful or mean, as opposed to just clever, or, you know, an appropriate way to put a bad person, a nasty person or whatever in his or her place. And then sometimes maybe one of, you know, a character I like or respect may go over the line a little, and then, you know, maybe he or she apologizes or, you know, feels bad about it. And then obviously there are some people who just are snarky in there and you know, they're not very nice people. So
We kill them.
I have one character in my story that I get all my snarkiness out in her. She is the snarky, she's an elderly woman who drinks, she swears, she says whatever she pleases, and that's it. But I get all my snarkiness out in that one character, so I don't have to worry about the rest of my characters coming off that way.
you work it off.
Jeannette, how about you?
I totally rely on the kindness of strangers, not so much strangers, but I do rely a lot on my first readers. I don't always get it. I will be honest, I don't always get it, even, you know, this many years in and this many books in. I still have first readers who will return the manuscript to me and say, you know, I didn't like her here. She's just, why is she going off on that tangent? Or, you know, what's this emotional outburst about? And I really trust them. I mean, over the years, I've built up, I think, some really fine people who can comment and who know me and my writing well. And, you know, thank God for them, because, you know, we get, I think, very close to it. And there are times when I just don't see what I'm writing. I don't, you know, I've been living with it for so long in my head. These people have been having these conversations. This plot has been evolving. And, you know, by the time I get it, you know, at least onto like a third draft, I have no idea anymore if any of this sounds right. I just don't know. So then I finish my part, I send it out. Before I even get it edited, I send it out to the first readers. What do you think of this overall? And thank God for them, because I have no clue sometimes. Sometimes I'm spot on, and sometimes I have no clue, and I have no idea what the difference is between those two. I would probably be a much richer author if I really could figure that one out, but I can't. So and thank God, you know, I mean, my life is I sit in a room and write. But thank God my book doesn't stay there. It goes out, and people comment, and it changes, and it lives, and it grows before it gets to publication, hopefully. So my answer is I have no clue. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure this out as we go along, you know?
So do you feel pressure to make your characters role models, or you just want them to be themselves and let the chips fall where they may?
Yeah. I don't, that role model stuff, it doesn't, I have no pressure to do that. I do think that the only rule I have that's hard and fast is it must be, you know, this person cannot hate animals.
Yeah.
That character who hates animals, I don't like them. And I want them to die, and I probably would kill them off. But other than that, I don't see, because I think role model, for me, I think role model is used probably too indiscriminately. And that, you know, there are qualities of every person that you might want to emulate or not. And so my characters usually have a variety of things like that, but they usually are good friends. You know, they're usually loyal and good friends, because I think that's an element that you have to have. And they're smart, right? We don't want some dumbbell. And truthfully, I've never written a character like that. And I don't like books. I don't care about the snarkiness, but if the character is a fool, then I do not want to read that.
Well, your readers aren't going to read it either. They're going to stop when they see that being part of your character, don't you think?
I don't know. Some of the we were mentioning the Stephanie Plum. She's kind of a dumbbell, yeah. And many million books later, she's still around.
The Plum Crazies, yes.
Yeah.
My character's a role model for myself. I want to be more like her. You know, I put things in her that I wish I were or could do, or you know, I think that as much as we might put a lot of ourselves into them, we also put a lot of our hopes. And, you know, in some ways, my protagonists are places where I'd like to evolve, even though they're younger than I am, that, you know, they've reached something that I haven't gotten yet. And I learned from them. I learned from all my characters. I learned from writing. I learned from reading. But I think in terms of saying that a modern heroine as a role model is just really limiting. You know,
So you just write what's true to you.
Yeah.
or to the story, you know. I mean, I'm really fortunate because I have this backdrop that is just filled with plots and characters, and all I have to do is walk down Main Street here. It's Commercial Street, but it's our Main Street. All I have to do is walk down that street, and I get ideas because I've got such a panoply of different kinds of people here. So what's important to me then, in terms, if to go back to your question about role models, is to make sure that I'm casting everybody in a light that is appropriate, so that, you know, because I'm really introducing people all over who are reading my books to a segment of the population they probably didn't know existed. So for example, one of my books is called Death of a Bear, and it's about a person. I mean, most straight people in the world don't know what bears are. You know, bears are overweight, hairy gay men who like other overweight, hairy gay men. I know I'm really simplifying that, but it's a thing. There's Bear Week. So if I'm going to bring this population in and introduce them to the world in some ways, to people who don't know about them and don't know anything about them, that's where I have to be very clear about these are possible role models. There may be some kid somewhere who's going to pick up his mother's copy of Death of a Bear and say, oh, wow, that's me. And I want to make sure that I have portrayed that in such a way that is accurate. So it's not about, I'm not going to take one of these communities and cast them in a light that I'm just doing for the sake of my book and my plot. So I think in that sense, it's really important to look at our characters as potential role models. But, you know, I mean, if I ever am like one of my characters, I'll be really happy.
Well, I mentioned humor and, oh, Chris, did you have a question?
Well, I don't have a question, but Gail has a question. She's asking, what does the panel think of Miss Fisher mysteries?
I love them.
Me too.
I love them because of Miss Fisher epitomizes so much. She does epitomize the modern woman, but I also love the hair and the clothes and every other thing about it. And Miss Fisher has quite a love life, as you might notice. She's very egalitarian.
There's something so sophisticated about it, I think, is why people love it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would agree with that.
Yeah, oh yeah.
She's smart. She's very accomplished. You know, she flies airplanes, she rides motorcycles and horses, and she shoots, and she knows martial art. I mean, she's so accomplished. That's fun. And she's not the helpless victim. She really takes charge. And as you guys have pointed out, she's a very loyal friend. She cares about her family. She's very loyal to her friend.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so.
And she's got the hot inspector too.
Oh, that's true.
So we had that question. So Sharon, your story takes place in the 1940s, World War II.
How
Yes.
do you keep your audience? Do you think World War II mysteries seem right now, they're so hot right now with people writing World War II mysteries? You got on that much earlier than the bandwagon started. So how did you keep your writers interested in World War II?
Well, I mean, I try to have a good story. Try to have good character, because you could do all the research in the world and you can grab the hottest properties in things. If you don't have characters that people care about, if you don't have a good story, especially if you want to do a period piece, you really have to not just do the research, but do it out in a way that's natural. You can't have a character say, oh, look, there's Eleanor Roosevelt walking with Charlie Chaplin. You know, it's got to be something that makes sense. I think people like this now because it's kind of like maybe when we were in our 20s and everybody liked Victorian novels or early turn of the century novels. It's historical now. And so I can, get in on that. But I think the main thing is that you have to have a good story and good characters. I think that's what draws people in. The people want to see which person might she choose to, go off with, and what's she going to do with her life, and what's going to happen to her sister. And, they want to keep reading to find out what this person is up to. So that's my answer.
And what do you think it is about that era that draws people in, though? Do we think of it as a time that things were better politics-wise in our country? Was it a simpler time? Was it a time where, everyone's happy?
People might, it's a complicated answer. I mean, I think a lot of people might think it was a simpler time.
Right.
But, let's face it, my husband's Chinese, my marriage would be illegal in many states at that time.
Mm-hmm.
I probably never would have been able to go to school and get a PhD, and would have been hard to get a job teaching in college. People are all rah, rah, World War II, everyone's pulling together. But the thing is, they didn't know how that was going to end.
Yeah.
I mean, I would really want to have to live through that. So I think people might over idealize it. I think they may think it was better in more ways than it was. There were some things that, you might like. The music was great. Movies were kind of fun and enjoyable. But I think part of it is an over idealization. I'm not quite sure what drew me to that. I guess my parents talked about the time. I loved the films. I liked some of the books. So it's really a complicated answer. I hope I sort of didn't make a complete mess of it.
Yeah. I always wondered how a woman went from that time frame where she was found herself now the breadwoman in the family. And when World War II was over, she's back into that role of housekeeper and taking care of the kids and doing what her husband wants. How that affected that woman's life. I always wondered about that. I imagine it was horrific going back to that type of a life.
I think it depends on the woman. From what I've read, talking to people, some women felt like I'm working out here, but I really want to be taking care of my family and running the family. And, because that is a full-time job. But some women, understandably, were very frustrated because I'm good at this. I can run an office. I can fly a plane. I can work heavy machinery. I can do all this stuff. So why am I stuck wasting my talent? So I think it's again, another thing that's very complicated. And, it would be wonderful. I think John Stuart Mill had it right when he said, just let people do what they're good at and what, gives, fulfills them. But we're still struggling with it.
You know what? I just saw that one of the audience members talked about, reading the Feminine Mystique.
Yeah.
And I think that for any of us who've read the Feminine Mystique, that absolutely characterizes what you're talking about, Sharon.
Yeah. Yeah.
A little later, period. Maybe it was late 50s or 60s when Betty Friedan wrote that. But I think it does talk about that kind of frustration, and it sort of opened people's eyes to that there were other horizons available for them.
I think there are two things going on with first, I wrote historical fiction long before I wrote mystery fiction. So, and my academic work was in history. So I'm always thinking from that point of view. I think one of the reasons that we like to read stories that take place in a historical era is that we feel isolated right now in terms of all the things that are happening to us. If I can read about someone who lived a century ago or whenever it happens to be, and they're going through some of the same things I am, they're different situations, but I can say, all right, you know, I'm not that alone. I'm not that isolated. Throughout time, you know, some of these same issues are coming up, and I can identify that, and that can give me some strength for figuring out how to make it work in my own life. I also think that wartime in particular is attractive because everything is sort of thrown into this sharp relief of, you know, if you're living in an environment, and certainly my French side of the family was living with the occupation of the Germans. If you're living in a situation where death could be tomorrow, well, we all are to some extent, but it's a little bit more blatant when there's a war going on and people are making sacrifices. And suddenly I think that kind of helps you cut through some of the other layers of things to see what really matters to you. And I think that that's a very attractive thing to read about, because it helps the reader without them working at it, without them having to think about thinking about it, but it helps them work through some of that stuff.
Back to Sharon Yang's point on women and the conflict of changing roles. If you're ever familiar with the excellent series by Susan Isaacs with Compromising Positions and the other books in that series, she really talks about a woman, a well-educated woman who is stuck out in the suburbs of Long Island and suddenly realizes that life is not what she wanted it to be. And that's a more contemporary woman, same conflict though.
Good point, Arlene. All right, we've learned a lot about our characters. We've learned a lot about you. I have a question that I always ask when I'm moderating a panel. And so I'm going to ask each of you, because we're talking about our female heroines. If your character, your main character, was a superhero, what would her superhero be and how would she use that? It's not as easy to answer as you would think, but it does tell people a lot about your character and about you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you actually have to know who the superheroes are, right, in order to answer that.
What would her superpower be?
Okay.
And why?
Superpower be. All right. Because I am snarky, and the first thing that came into my mind when I thought about that was her superpower would be to be able to take back that stupid thing she just said and have it be unheard by everybody else in the room. So that's where my brain goes. Like, if I could just take back what I just said because it was really stupid, and then they'll think I'm smart. I think she and I could both benefit from that.
So that goes back to our snarkiness.
Oh,
then,
yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah. With me, it invariably ends up there, yeah.
For my character, I'm sorry, Sharon, go on.
Oh, why don't you go ahead, Arlene?
No, it's nothing spectacular. Just that for my characters, it would be a sense of balance and a sense of humor. Because I think if you have a good sense of humor, that allows you to place yourself and everything else in the firmament of time, and you understand a little bit better that some things really aren't that big a deal, and and you can also have self-control. That would be my other thing, to sometimes not say what you'd like to say.
I think Jessica would like to have a superpower of always knowing whom to trust, because the world she keeps moving through, there are so many people that she thinks are her friends and work very hard to be her friends who aren't, and they're very dangerous. And I think that's kind of an important power all of us would like to have, because that would be one way you wouldn't get hurt, you wouldn't make the wrong decisions, you wouldn't lead other people astray. So, and I think really comes through my stories. The more I think about it, she's not stupid. She's very smart and she's discerning in some ways, but some people are really good liars and manipulators, and she can't always tell, and she gets hurt, or people she loves get hurt because of that. So I think that would be a power she would like to have, to know whom you can really trust.
How about you, Sharon?
Well, I think Liesl would love to have the ability to eat everything she'd like
Oh,
and
man.
never gain pounds.
Mhm.
Liesl is a foodie.
Amen.
She loves food. Her mother at the inn is a terrible, terrible cook. So, but her very best friend owns a cafe in town and makes amazing pastries and desserts. So I think Liesl would love to just eat anything she wants and not gain an ounce. Maybe lose weight as she's eating would be her superpower, I think. Well, we're at 3:15. Would we like to read something from our book so that our audience gets a feel for our characters, and then we can take questions from them?
Sure.
Or is everyone prepared to read something?
I can always read something.
Ladies, the rest of you, would you like to do that to give them a feel, and then we can field some questions from our audience?
Okay, yeah. Maybe just like a couple of pages.
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, if I can find mine, I know what I'd like to read, I just gotta find it.
And which book are we reading from?
I'm gonna read from Letter from a Dead Man.
Okay.
I have to find it, I didn't put a bookmark in here. Maybe someone else can go first and then.
I'll go ahead and start,
Yeah.
since everyone
Yeah.
else is silent.
I know, I can't
It's
find
not a
what I-
passage that particularly illustrates anything about a modern heroine other than Sydney, the protagonist,
Yeah.
observing Provincetown, which is what she spends a lot of time doing. And this is from the first book in the series, which is Death of a Bear. Shopping at the supermarket is never a straightforward endeavor in Provincetown. In the winter, you make your way slowly from aisle to aisle, at every turn seeing someone you know and haven't talked to in a while. Stop and Shop as information central. In the summer, making your way anywhere in the supermarket is a trial by patience, as chances are good that you're going to get stuck at least 3 times behind groups of tourists stocking up for cookouts and brunches. And tourists, as we all know, have a blind spot, probably several. Not just in the aisles either. They come and spend amazing amounts of money to keep the town afloat, but that we can't help but envy. Most of us who live here year-round aren't particularly wealthy. Some of us were born here and are grittily determined to stay no matter how much gentrification comes our way. The rest of us are called wash-ashores and mainly came here because we felt for one reason or another that we had to. Artists and writers who get fellowships to the Fine Arts Work Center and found their muse, gay men who came here during the scourge of the 80s and then didn't die after all. Tourists who fell in love with the place and spent the next 5 years figuring a way to live here. There's a soup kitchen in the winter. There's interminable talk about the dearth of affordable housing. In the summer, people work 3, 4, 5 jobs. In the winter, there's 1 job if they're lucky, unemployment if they're not. And then the summer, the season comes and the rich flood into town eating $15 hamburgers and renting $10,000 a week condos and getting drunk and silly in the streets. It's my time, the season. I spend most of the winter planning weddings and the spring, summer, and fall making sure that everything connected with them goes smoothly, or as close to smoothly as I can approximate, given Murphy's Law, whether or not Venus is in retrograde, and the sheer ornery nature of life. In March, I love it. By October, I'm ready to shoot somebody, preferably myself. So that's sort of an introduction to
I like that.
town.
I like that. I'll take
Yes,
it.
go ahead, Sharon.
Yes.
Okay, well, this is, as I said, it's Letter from a Dead Man. And I'm very proud to say my husband did the cover for me. And Jessica Minton has just sort of sent her cat off on a little vacation with her friend in Connecticut because she's afraid after she broke into, well, she didn't break in, she sort of snuck in and retrieved a gun that some crooks were using to blackmail her sister's boyfriend. that they may try to get even. And one of those crooks is Eddie Quebec. Hey, Miss Minton, you seemed in kind of a hurry. Eddie Quebec stepped from behind one of the portico stone pillars, and had her by the elbow. His tone was amiable, and yet not. Promptly extricating herself from Quebec's paw, Jessica reported, I'm in a hurry and I've nothing to say to you. She hoped he couldn't tell that inside she felt about as stalwart as a jellyfish.
Oh.
Then I'll just walk down the steps with you, if you don't mind. I do mind, Jessica asserted, leaving him behind. But that's not friendly, is it? He queried, catching up. We have so much in common. Searching for an available cab, Jess warily kept Tewksbury's, this is the woman who controls this guy, torpedo in the corner of her eye. At least there were too many people around for him to try any funny business. Aw, you looking for a hack? Let me help you. They were almost down the broad stone steps level with the lions, and Jessica realized if she wanted to keep the upper hand, she'd have to square off with Quebec. Otherwise, no matter how tartly she spoke, she was just running away. All right, Buster. I know you're not here because you ran out of old ladies to help across the street. What are you selling? The direct approach seemed momentarily to flummox him. Unexpectedly, Quebec burst into a grin, more wolfish than endearing. Like I said, we got a lot in common. Like we both know that peroxide viper you work for killed Evan Blair, or maybe you pulled the trigger for her. The wolfish grin widened. For a second, Jessica thought he might swallow her, but she refused to be quailed. Then Quebec pushed back. It's your pal Larry Sanders' gun that did it. Ah, the opening she'd been waiting for. Jessica challenged Quebec. Go ahead, turn it over to the cops. Of course you've had it so long you're now a bunch of accessories after the fact. No more like during, since one of you is the killer. We don't have the gun, but I think you know that, don't you, honey? He had blue eyes. They were like blue steel, the stuff of razor blades. You know, we can make things nasty for you and that cat of yours if you don't give us the gun. Something snapped inside. Jessica grabbed Quebec's tie and jerked his head down so forcefully he couldn't breathe. She snarled, you even look threateningly at my cat, and I'll fix it so that you can audition for the Andrews sisters as their new soprano. Get me? Jessica shoved the startled thug back so hard he almost hit the steps, rump first. Before he could regain his respiration or his wits, she stormed out to the street, hailed a miraculously available cab, and popped in. Take me to, not so fast, girlie, came Quebec's low growl as he leaned into the cab window. Ignore him. Not if you know what's good for you, bud, Quebec threatened before turning on Jess with, look, sister, don't play games with me. You ain't going to pin nothing on my boss. You aren't going to pin anything on Larry Sanders, Buster Brown. At least he has the advantage of being innocent. Honey, we got the advantage of money and muscle, and that's all that matters in this dog-eat-dog world. That's dog-eat-dog, Einstein. You ought to what? The voice was Leo McLaughlin's. Let the lady have her cab. McLaughlin, you're a little off your beat, ain't you? Replied Quebec, still dialing back in front of the law. Jessica watched silently. Interestingly, Quebec didn't seem in much of a hurry to rat out Larry. She relaxed just a notch. Even cops go to the library. Didn't you think I could read, Quebec? McLaughlin's style was easy, but an underlying edge checked Tewksbury's strong arm. I was just helping Miss Minton here get her cab and giving her a friendly greeting from a mutual friend. Uh-huh. Would that friend be Mrs. Wilmington Tewksbury? Leo McLaughlin's query was casual, but it had its intended effect. Eddie Quebec took a step back. Good, Jessica concluded to herself. Alana's not immune to suspicion if she doesn't have something to hold over Larry. Okay, that's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I'm going to try. I can't read this too well. My eyes are not working too well. So this is from Death by Dog Show. And it involves the protagonist is in a motor home barreling down the highway toward a dog show with 2,000 participants. And she knows she's going to be there for a week and she doesn't know she's going to survive. Road trips always rattled me. They carried me back to my Army days in an airless transport truck where I sat wedged between raunchy guys with mixed emotions and motives. I had to admit that they weren't practitioners of that international game, but they did know Russian hands and Roman fingers. In these times, I needed sharp elbows and even sharper tongue to survive. Out of necessity, I had acquired both. They weren't a bad bunch. Like many of us, they were kids and soldiers. We served our country and learned invaluable lessons that strengthened us if we survived. Things were different now, and with these memories still hovered around my mind as I barreled down the road in my friend first class highway motorhome, top speed without missing a beat. There, for the 100th time, I wondered how in the world I would ever agree and survive the following week. 7 whole days in close quarters with my best friend and several thousand dog enthusiasts. The possibilities for mischief were endless. That's all I'm going to read because I'm having trouble seeing it, but that just gives you an idea.
Thank you. Sharon, you're up.
Oh, me as well. All right, I'm looking for something here. I think I'll just tell you at the beginning. My story starts off, if I can find this. It starts off the week before Christmas, and in the town we live in, it's Points, North New Hampshire, and there's a historic district, and they have an open house where you walk through people's homes, and it's as if they're putting on a show for you. They don't see you. They're stringing popcorn. They're dressed in garb from that turn of the century. And Liesl does not want to participate in this at all. Her outfit for the night is a 2-plaid, 2-ruffled, 2-tight gown. And she's done everything she possibly can to get out of this. So I'll just read something about that. That's the page I opened up. Drape even the slimmest of women in a checkered tablecloth and force her to stand in front of a full-length mirror, and you're asking for a tantrum. Madras plaids, tartans, buffalo checks, ginghams, and horizontal stripes have no business in my wardrobe, let alone thrown together in a single garment. I can't even begin to describe the monstrosity Gil Blodgett, editor of the Comfort Rose, however, was never at a lack for words. He dubbed it the amazing Technicolor sausage casing. It was horrid last year when it was a bit more than snug. The year before that when it pinched and prodded regions no garment had a right to even explore. And the year before that when it was just plain hideous. This afternoon it was even worse. It had shrunk. Somehow during the past 12 months, packed in bubble wrap and surrounded by mothballs, it managed to compress, condense, and contract. Squeezed, squashed, crushed, and cramped, I wedged myself into most of the flounce and ruffled perversion, but there was still the matter of the zipper. It wasn't about to budge. I let out my breath until I was certain my lungs had collapsed and tugged the zipper upward, ever so gently, hoping to avoid disaster. As if to tease, the zipper glided effortlessly up to my mid-back where it reached an impasse. I tried to zipper while lying face down on the bed. I tried it lying face up and arching my back. I tried pulling it down my back to the skirt with one hand and pulling up the zipper with the other. I took 2 short breaths, exhaled again, and again, then some, shrilling my oxygen-starved lungs. My head ached, my eyes were about to pop. The headline of my obituary flashed before my eyes. Local woman perishes in plaid tragedy. In a last-ditch effort, I threw my shoulder blades back as close as they could come as they possibly yanked the foolish thing. Success. My eyes closed. I turned to face the mirror. I opened them slowly and quickly wished I hadn't. I looked like a mixed-match boa constrictor who'd swallowed a water buffalo.
Love it. Great.
I told you about Liesl and her.
I love that because I just asked in the chat what makes a great main character. And I think that Sharon, you just captured it, which is this unique voice. I mean, that Liesl just came through so clearly in your reading. And I think that that's really essential, that you would not confuse her with anyone else. I love that. Yeah. I love that.
So, Chris, do you have any questions for us before we move on to our audience?
I do. Yeah. I think it's kind of a fun question. So every month we get a trade magazine that an update as to what is the hot sellers as far as the genre goes: adult fiction, adult nonfiction, children's board books, children's fictions, ebooks, things like that. One of the hottest sellers for the longest time now, and still growing, is audiobooks.
Oh.
If you were to ever do an audiobook of one of your main characters, who would you want to be the voice? Is there an actor or actress or a particular voice that you'd love to voice your character? And even let's go one step further. Let's do it as a movie as well. You're going to turn your book into a movie. Who would you want to play your main character?
Sharon Young, this question's for you. You've been thinking about this for ages. I know you have.
Me?
Yeah, you think about movies. You see it in everything in movies. I love that. It's so visual.
Well, my problem is they're almost all of them are dead. So
He did not say that the actor has to be alive.
That's right.
oh, all right. Well, definitely, as I was saying, Jessica and Liz would be Joan Bennett and Rosalind Russell, because I based a little bit of Elizabeth on my sister-in-law. I made her husband, I based him on Peter O'Toole because my sister-in-law just adores him. I'm not going to say who James Crawford is. That's my secret. And Dusty the cat, well, she actually was based on a real cat, Dusty. But actually I did, in some of the later novels, some of the actors are more recent, like there's an FBI agent with a past in the second novel, and he also shows up in the third one. And I thought, well, gee, as an X-Files fan, who would be a good person to cast as an FBI agent? So I thought of David Duchovny, and I actually named the character, his last name is Hui, because in Chinese, Hu Li is how you say fox. So those are just some of the people that I thought of. So that's me. Anybody else?
For my character of Liesl Allen, I would pick, do any of you know the TV show 2.5 Men?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the character of Rose on 2.5 Men.
But
She
I
was
don't
the
remember
next door neighbor who was always in love with Charlie. She was kind of an odd woman.
Who's the actress, Sharon?
Oh, I'd have to look it up. But in my mind, she was
Yeah.
always Liesl
Yeah.
in my mind.
Yeah.
Because she's quirky, but she is smart.
Yeah.
She's a little bit conniving. She's crafty. She says what she thinks. But in my mind, she always played the part of Liesl.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I in the dog show series, Wing Pruitt is absolutely the actor Russell Wong, absolutely, and therefore I have to study him quite closely, including YouTube videos and every other thing, so I get the movements correctly. But I always think that my books would make great Hallmark movies.
Yeah.
I mean, they really would. Why doesn't Hallmark believe that? I think that they would, because they're would sustain it better. But for the protagonist, for Persephone Morgan, I don't know who would. I can't figure out which actress I would like for that. For her best friend Babette, I'd like someone the way they used to have a couple of the characters when Betty White was young.
Oh, yeah.
Her kind of character. I think she would have, because she's 100 now, so can't hold her responsible now. But I would see her for that. I would see her for that. But every once in a while, you see. Sometimes it's easier to visualize the male characters because of the actors you're looking at than the female ones. Because I would play a starring part in anything.
Well, I would pick Ryan Gosling for my male lead, not because he looks anything like my male character, but I'd want to be there to check out the set and make sure he's doing things right. So I would pick Ryan Gosling for that part.
So for Sharon Daynard, Melanie Linsky is the actress that plays.
Ah, okay, thank you.
Oh.
But I always picture.
This is a man who can Google.
So the next question.
On the book, it's tough because you're not seeing the persona. So you really need to have that communicated through the voice. And I'm not really familiar with enough actors. I think that probably I would want a French actor for Martine. So someone like Marion Cotillard or someone like that has got that richness of voice. And honestly, for Sydney, I think, again, just thinking of the voice, I would probably want someone like Diane Lane, who I think has some interesting colorations in her, if you just listen to her. I've never heard her read anything, so I don't know, but I think that she would be someone she's slightly older than Sydney is, but I don't think that that's a problem. I could see her having similar traits in terms of the way she speaks and pauses and that sort of thing. But that's just, I don't know actors that well, so it's a tough one. I would like to have someone read it who would be incredibly good and articulate and make people want to buy even more copies.
Have any of you thought of doing putting your books in audiobook format?
I'm doing it now. I'm reading my own books actually into they're eventually the Montreal series is going to be on Audible. But right now I'm just reading it as podcasts for a group of patrons that give me money every month, apparently, because they think I'm a good artist. And so I've been doing a chapter a week. I had to, buy some really expensive audio equipment, but I've been doing some podcasting anyway, so that works well together. I do think it's kind of nice when the author reads it, because the author does know where they want the emphasis and where they, that it's their creature. So they are in a sense the actor and the director and the producer and all those things to the audio. And I think that if anyone's articulate at all, it's a good thing to read their own books. I like it when I hear authors read their own books, but not everybody can.
I'll show you my Bait and Switch actually is on audio on Audible.
Nice.
What's the one for Amazon? Is that Audible?
That's Audible.
Yeah, so that is on, and I've never heard the whole thing through. That it wasn't, I was given a sample, and the reader seemed pretty good. There were some things, though, some of her intonations that I thought were not appropriate to my Jessica. I gave commentary on that. So I don't know. I would love to hear it sometime. I guess I have to get a subscription to it and blah, 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 but I don't know how it is. So somebody get it and tell me how it sounds.
See, I also don't listen to books, so it's kind of a foreign thing to me.
Yeah.
I don't listen to books on tape. I don't listen to any of that stuff, and I prefer to read. I prefer to learn things by reading rather than by hearing. So it's also that's a step. It's definitely a step away from my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Well, this is partly a shameless plug, but there is an audiobook company, an independent audiobook company that we are partnered with called Libro.fm.
Libro.fm, yeah.
We get a portion of sales if you go through our site, and patrons it's free to subscribe, or it's free to make an account. And you can buy them a la carte. You can do memberships, and they have deals and stuff throughout that, and club stuff and club picks for different kids club, business club, romance club, things like that. And but a lot of people don't.
It's a great way to support your local independent booksellers, which is what we all want to do.
Yeah, it is. And what's nice too is you can choose which bookstore you want to. Of course, we want you to pick ours, but you can go in and change who you'd like to support for your purchase and stuff like that. Well, but the reason I'm bringing it up is that is another platform that a lot of authors don't know about when they're going for their audio, to do audiobooks. And one thing I just found out too is that with Audible, for those who haven't done it yet, one thing to be careful of is there's an exclusivity, not a feature, but a thing with Audible where you're not allowed to go anywhere else except for Audible. So therefore, I can't promote your book, your
Mhm.
audiobook,
Exactly.
because it's only available through them. And sorry, I'm not going to promote,
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't.
but one of our good friends, writers here, she's from New York, Elena Mugden. Her book has done really well here, and she did that, and it was exclusively through Audible. But
Mhm.
then that just ran out, and so her agent or publisher started distributing it through. It's available through Libro, and there's one or two other small ones that I'm not familiar with. But anyway, so that's just something to keep in mind when you're doing that. If you and pass this around too, watch out for that exclusive
Yeah.
with Audible thing, because then we can't
Exactly.
promote it
Right.
for you.
I think that, all of us are kind of dancing around this 600-pound gorilla that's Amazon. That I would prefer it if Amazon were wiped off the face of the earth. I don't buy from them. I do subscribe to Prime, but only for streaming things. And I really wish that I could only sell my books through independent booksellers. We have 3 of them in town, and I support them 100%. The truth is that for most of us who sell through Amazon, I would not be able to pay my mortgage if I only sold through independent booksellers. That's my reality, that I make so much more money per book, and then in terms of volume on Amazon, that if I were to stop that, I would have to move somewhere else.
And we completely understand that. We know that as an author, you have to go every
It's such
route.
a conflict, though, for most of
See,
us, because
yeah.
we don't want to be supporting Amazon. And
Right.
I do want to tell people to go to Freethinker's Corner and to go to East End Books and to go to the Provincetown Bookshop. I want those places to survive and flourish. And as I try to balance, again, it's a balancing thing. I try to balance, please go and buy this at an independent bookseller. But, if you'd like to put a review on Amazon or on Goodreads or something that's going to bring in more people, that's good too. It's just such a moral dilemma is what it is.
Yeah, my whole purpose for mentioning it was it's another platform to go out to, and just be careful of the exclusiveness
Right.
and restrictions that Amazon puts on your books, your audiobooks, the ebooks. We have another partnered company called Hummingbird Digital Media. Our store in particular uses them to promote ebooks, but they both do ebooks and audiobooks. We just joined Libro first, so we're promoting them for our ebook sales, or for our audiobook sales, and then Hummingbird for ebooks. But again, we go through our website, or you go directly to them. You can pick the store and portions of sales. But that's the only thing. The big reason I'm mentioning it. I totally understand the whole Amazon thing,
Yeah.
but so
and I think that needs to be part of our discourse between booksellers and authors and readers, and trying to figure out how to make this work equitably for everybody. It's really tough.
Because Amazon doesn't do this.
No, Amazon does not do this for sure.
So that's my Amazon bashing for the day. So my next question is, if we're ready to move on, the next question is, I know you're all mystery writers, and I'm sure you love reading mystery books, and you get a lot of inspiration from them too. But back to the modern heroine character. Actually, I have 2 more questions. First one, let's go back further to Margaret Atwood's, when we were talking about what constitutes a modern heroine. And, we were talking about during the time period that you're writing about, or that character takes place. What about Margaret Atwood's character June in The Handmaid's Tale? Would you consider her a modern heroine?
That's a good question.
Oh, I would, in the sense that in very restrictive circumstances that she had to exist in, she did her best to assert herself and to help others to assert themselves, at penalty of death, really. I mean, that was such a dark, dark book, though. Man, I felt depressed in reading that, quite frankly. But I would consider her to be a modern heroine, yes.
So I haven't read The Testament yet. We do have that one here too, but I haven't read that one yet, so I don't know if that carries on. And the reason I'm
Slightly more cheerful, only slightly so.
Well, I don't remember who it was, but somebody had mentioned The Scarlet Letter, and so the character in that, and I remember that book fairly well, and so but June's character kind of popped up in my head, where this kind of strong woman is defying what's going on in the time that she's at. And so that's why I'm wondering what you thought about her character. Like I said, and I just started watching The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu there, and so I don't know if second, third season or whatever goes well along with the Testaments, but just again, back in general, would you consider her character a modern?
I think also that's kind of I don't want to use the word gimmick because that's not correct, but a construct to if indeed you want to show a woman, a modern heroine, is to place her in a situation that's restrictive. And it's one of the reasons that again, we do this with historical fiction and historical mysteries, is to find these more, or make them up as Atwood did, is to find these restrictive environments where it can be more apparent that she's got these traits, that she's got this independence, that she's got whatever it is that's making her modern. You notice that more in an environment like that than you do, for instance, in my environment, where pretty much anything goes in Provincetown. So it's a very different environment, and so my modern heroine has to do different things to seem modern and assertive in an environment like this. Whereas if you put them in a prison or a cult or a historical era and societal level where she's restricted, then it's almost easier then to make her feel modern, because she's got so much more to fight against and it's so blatant and obvious. Whereas sometimes that's more subtle in other books. But I would say, I would agree with Arlene. Yeah, I would say that she is, again, to the extent that she's able to, she's controlling what she can, and it's not that much.
I would think that if you're talking about a non-mystery where you have a good sort of heroine in the Hunger Games, now there's someone who is, that protagonist there, she's really a modern person in a time that's not modern, and indeed is defying all kinds of ads. I did love her. I didn't like that Atwood character at all. It was just too, who wants to slit your wrists after reading a book? Geez, you want some uplifting things.
That kind of leads me to my next question was, outside of the mystery genre, do you have other favorite, be it fantasy, sci-fi, books, characters, strong female heroine type characters from other genres, such as like the Hunger Games?
Well, I used to teach Victorian literature and also Shakespeare. So there are a lot of really great women, like Rosalind As You Like It. I mean, she's so witty, she's smart, she shows the way, she does it. But what's kind of fun about her too is she's aware of her own weaknesses, and rather than being judgmental, she uses that to help others. She says, in Searching of Thy Wound, I have found mine own, about Orlando, when he's, acting like a dope. And then I was talking with Jeannette about this the other day. One of my favorite novels is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell. And at the time, and even, into the 20th century, you would sometimes seeing the heroine just at the crisis, she'd faint. She'd always faint. But Margaret Hale, she's wonderful. The only way she faints is someone hits her in the head with a rock. And that's when she's trying to protect someone during a violent strike. So, I love a lot of the women in Victorian novels and in Shakespeare. And, they influence me a lot because of, they have a sense of integrity, a sense of moral responsibility. Not that they're running around with placards, but they always want to do the right thing and help others. And it's not always easy for them. And they have to, stand out against what is considered proper for women at the time and still maneuver within the system. And I think that, that still speaks to us today sometimes. I mean, we can speak out, but there are still ways that the system is, kind of constraining us. So that's how I feel.
I have started reading, and I don't know why I read the series because I really don't like. but a very good author, Joanne Ferguson, who's been very kind to me, she's written a series of Amish books for Harlequin. And I'm telling you, you would know this is a bookseller, Chris. Those things sell. I don't know why. You know, it's an unreal life. And yet I buy the books out of loyalty to her. And then I kind of get caught up in the story, even though I wouldn't want to live that way. And the women are not, you know, terribly heroic and all that kind of stuff. Maybe it's the food. They really have good food in those Amish books. So maybe that's why I've started to read that. But I have read 10 books in her series because, you know, I don't know why, but they sell. Boy, they sure do sell a lot of them.
And I was trying to think back when my children were younger to books I read with them. I mentioned earlier Scout Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird. I think she's a wonderful character. Matilda from the book Matilda. I think also Hermione from the Harry Potter books is an amazing character. So I think, you know, a lot like that. It doesn't have, like I said, it doesn't have to be an adult. We have a child that can be an amazing character as well.
There are a couple of genres I find interesting. My one that's very close to what we do, and forgive me if I grab this off my desk, but I actually have her picture framed on my desk. This is Mary Stewart, who wrote romantic thrillers. There's a kind of genre in there that was very popular in like the 50s and 60s and into the 70s. And I swear this, I've written this, I've said this to people, anything that I know about characterization and dialogue, I learned from Mary Stewart. I think that reading her books is like a master class. So I'm always looking for something that will do that for me again. You know, it's almost like I've had this high and now I want the drug again. I need more Mary Stewart and she's dead, damn her. So I'm always trying to find something that is going to lift my work in some way. And oddly enough, I often find that in nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction. Some of it's for research and some of it's just out of pure curiosity. But I find that there are a lot of people that you encounter when you're reading nonfiction and events that you may not think at the time this is going to work in a book, but it connects back down the line. The other genre I'm finding interesting, and I'm not necessarily going to stick with it because some of it really is difficult for me to read, but I think that the cutting edge in a lot of literature right now is very surprisingly horror. I think horror is doing some things that mystery tried to do, that some literary fiction has tried to do, that there are some boundaries there that they're looking at even better. And I should say that the real genre that I think started this was science fiction, and I've never been able to read science fiction very well. But both of those are really testing limits in ways that other genres used to and may not be so much now because we're focusing on other things. I know that a recent movie called Antebellum, which was panned and did not do well and did not do what it was supposed to do terribly well, but it's starting this process of looking at how we can look at the world and history and people and see it through this skewed lens of horror and understand it in different ways that way, in the same way that science fiction authors could take you to another planet and help you explore something that's relevant to your life here, but is safely out there. I think horror does that too. I'm not sure how long I'm going to stick with this current reading jag I'm on because some of the horror really is horrible. And it's also very scary, and I live alone. So, but yeah, I think you're right in that we do need to expand what we look at as our sources. I think that I would feel very impoverished if all I read was my own genre. And I think after a while that gets really claustrophobic. Not to say that I don't read mystery authors and think, oh my God, how did she do that? That was brilliant. I'm very jealous of them sometimes, but I think that reading as wide a range of characters and plots as possible makes you a better writer, just like it makes you a better person, I think.
And I'd like to mention darker fiction, Lisbeth Salander from The Girl.
Oh, I loved it, yeah.
I think fits the mold of a modern heroine precisely, but that is, again, darker fiction and darker characters and subject matter.
Yeah, Sharon, earlier you were talking about noir, and it's the same kind of, you know, I do partly read to be entertained, but I also read to be enlightened and to be touched emotionally. And if that emotional touch is not a happy one, that's okay. You know, I'd rather feel sad at the end of a book but feel enriched for having met the characters and gone through the story with them, than to just read something for sheer entertainment, which is not to say, especially lately, that I haven't been going for the light, you know.
Sharon Daynard, what you just mentioned about Elizabeth Salander, I love those books. But I have to say, all these Scandinavian writers, they're kind of depressing. And I think it has to do maybe with the weather. But if you watch the streaming services that are set in Scandinavia, you know, it's dark and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But I do like all of those. And I liked, there are a number of series that I read, you know, from Scandinavian things, and I did like them. They weren't necessarily mystery. They were more like police procedurals and things of that nature. And I did like them, although I didn't feel as happy. You read Nero Wolfe and you'll know that you can sit there and eat the whole time.
You know what I'm saying, Arlene? Lots of mental illness in stories that come out of Scandinavia, it seems.
No kidding.
What do you think about the character there in The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo? That's a Scandinavian type, female.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, no, I liked her.
Okay, I couldn't remember what the character name was.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Salander, I liked her, and I liked the fact that she knew how to take revenge and avenge herself and take care of people who had been good to her and all that kind of stuff. I thought she was great, yeah. I wouldn't want to get on her bad side, though.
Is there because we were talking about different timelines too, you know, the heroine is certain characteristics for certain time periods. Is there a universal characteristic that kind of can go through time to make a heroine, a modern heroine that's just universal, a universal characteristic?
I think she has to be intrepid. I think she has to be willing to take some chances, ask questions. It doesn't mean she's not scared at times or she accomplishes everything, but she has to be independent enough to kind of make that leap to go where other people aren't willing to go. And, you know, otherwise you would have no story. And that's one of the reasons with the suspense. You worry about what's going to happen to her and what is she going to discover.
I think that's brilliant. I would totally second that because, you know, when I was saying earlier, I wish I were more like my characters. Yeah. I'm the kind of person who would stand back and say someone else is going to deal with that. I don't have to go look at the body. And we write characters who do have to go look at the body. And I totally agree that is something that transcends genre and time and all sorts of things for an interesting character. I agree.
That she realizes is a bigger cause than just herself.
Yeah.
I think that's
and she's willing to put herself on the line for it. That she's not going to let circumstances or her societal role or her profession or any of those things stand in her way.
Yeah.
Or men.
Well, we're coming up to the next, the last couple of minutes. Is there anything from the audience that, a quick question that anybody would like to ask?
Looks like people are sitting down to tea.
I think so.
That looks like a good idea to me.
So Sharon Yang's tea is probably cold by now, so she's going to get her.
It's been completely imbibed, so.
Yeah, there you go.
I have my coffee.
Well,
Yes.
are there any last minute?
I have a question for Sharon Yang.
Oh, okay. Yes, Jen.
So, is it Mrs. Wilmington Tewksbury?
Yes. You get the in joke on that?
Yes. I used to live in Wilmington, so I picked up on that immediately.
That's my Easter egg. Yeah, I've got all kinds of Easter eggs and names too, like Jeannette. Yeah, it's kind of fun to see how many people get some of these things.
Right.
You know, if people who know I was like a Dark Shadows fanatic and X-Files and Star Trek and love the Moody Blues and the Supremes, you know, there may be you know, they'll get all these little names, or sometimes actually a lyric from a song will be in someone's conversation. So yes, that's Mrs. Wilmington Tewksbury. That's those two cities together.
Funny.
Well, I have a World War II set time travel that I hope to release in the spring or early next year. And I do a lot of that. I have a lot of Doctor Who jokes because, of course, it's time travel, so you have to
of
have,
course.
Doctor Who in there. And but I did cast it. And
Okay.
my hero, who is a sergeant in the U.S. Army in 1943, is Dana Andrews.
Oh,
And
perfect. Perfect.
Oh,
the
yeah.
heroine is Ava Gardner. So
Oh, wow.
even though she's a modern woman, she's from our contemporary times, I should say.
Right.
She's thoroughly modern, but
Right. And beautiful.
so that's not a question, just a plug I wanted to get in there. So.
No, did you read that at a part of that at our reading? I can't remember when we had the member reads. Did you?
No, that was a World War II set paranormal that
Okay.
my agent actually has out to a couple of
Okay.
publishers right now.
Okay.
So
I had the right person though.
yes, I'm glad you remembered.
Oh, of course. How could I forget?
And Carol Lombard is the heroine in that story.
Oh, wonderful. Wow. There's a smart talking gal, good with the quick, wouldn't take anything from nobody.
That's right.
Yeah, she had Clark Gable in line.
But I've really enjoyed this. This has been a lot of fun. I really love hearing about other people's processes and how you come about getting to these heroines or however you do those things. And one thing that I found I really differ on is I love to listen to audiobooks because when I actually read on a print book, I find myself rewriting certain paragraphs or phrases or whatever. It's like, how would I have done this? So when I'm listening to an audiobook, I'm not seeing it. So it's just coming into my ears and it's like, so I'm hearing how the words are and I can't sort of like rewrite it as I'm going. It really makes me appreciate how the author, the turn of phrase, or if it's a mystery, then how they manage to build the clues and all that. So anyway.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yes, it was a lot of fun.
Thank you all for coming. We appreciate all of you coming. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And I see, thank you, Anita and Joan, my friend.
Thank you to Sharon for being our
Yes, Sharon. Thank you.
Good job, Sharon.
Thank you.
Great
very much. It's so much fun.
Thank you, Chris, for hosting us.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
thank
You're welcome. My pleasure. And then looking forward to having you all into the store at some point.
We would love
And
to be
Sharon-
there at some point.
Yeah.
Yes.
I got a
Yes.
couple of Sharon Yang's books in the store. Again, I'm hoping to get everybody's because usually what I do, a live thing here, I usually, get a couple from you to have here in the store. But so hopefully we'll be able to do that soon, as soon as our budget allows.
This is what's coming out on October 1st, The Lethal
Yes.
Legacy, a Provincetown Mystery.
Excellent.
But if you can't find it in our store, then always go to bookshop.org. Is another place there that we partner with that remits some of the sales to us. You can get to it either bookshop.org or through the link through our website. You can search the bookstore that you choose
And can
to.
people order books from you, Chris, directly?
Yep, you can absolutely call me, message me through the website or email, and I can order it for you. Have it shipped direct to you. You can come pick it up. We can do contact pickup if you'd like. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to get alternative ways to get the book.
That's good. We like that.
So
all right.
Yes,
Well,
that's
thank you
it.
all.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.
It's a fun time.
Hope we get to do it again.
Yes. Yes.
Maybe in person then.
Yes. Yay. That would be great.
That would be lovely. Bye, everyone.
all right,
Bye-bye. Thank you.